Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I am delighted on this Tuesday afternoon to welcome James Mackenzie. What's your location, James? Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, Scotland.
Yep, the Edinburgh TARDIS. Kevin McCluskey, where are you from? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling in from sunny Budapest, mate.
Sunny
I've had to-
Budapest. I like the sound of
I've
that.
had to close the blinds behind me just not to sicken you with the sunlight that's coming through.
But you'll just fill us in to sicken us anyway.
I'll just
Thanks,
tell you
Kev.
anyway. Aye.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. And Liam Carrigan, Celtic Down Under's very own Japanese correspondent. You will be buzzing this week, my man.
Yep, just one more sleep till Celtic. I am very, very excited. Cannot wait to get down to Yokohama tomorrow and see the boys play for the first time in more than 10 years.
We'll start off with that, I think. Liam, yeah, you will be absolutely buzzing. When was the last time you were at Celtic Park?
Last time I was at Celtic Park was in 2012, the Champions League group game against Spartak Moscow, where we beat them 2-1 with a Chris Commons penalty.
Mm-hmm. I remember that game vividly.
Because we spoke about this on the WhatsApp. That was actually on my birthday that day.
Yeah.
That game, yes. So Chris Commons got his penalty was at 86 minutes, and it was all for me. That was his birthday present for me.
Of course. What about the way that Chris Commons' kind of Celtic relationship? It went out of nowhere. It went really on a upwards trajectory. Him and his missus really embraced Celtic, the fan base. And when you look back on his career at Celtic, you know, the goals he scored, in particular under Neil Lennon, you know, within that period, he was a bit of a fan's favourite. But it's gone a bit sour now, hasn't it, Liam?
Yeah, it's the unfortunate, the poison of the press, unfortunately. You know, I don't know how much of the words that are attributed to Chris Commons these days are actually written by him, because it's a fact that a lot of these quote-unquote celebrity columns are ghostwritten.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, he's still looking at it and he's still willing to put his name to it. So that's on him, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. It is a shame, though. It was something of a hero, more kind of your era, I guess, James. I remember Declan talking about him as being a bit of a hero from his, you know, Celtic childhood, even. Unfortunately, like some others, like Charlie Nicholas, you know, he's kind of not as revered now due to his post-football playing career. We spoke last week with Jim Orr about how it might be possible for that to change with Charlie. And obviously he asked us to go and watch the Icon show. There's going to be people in the comment section saying, absolutely no way, I've got a view on him and that's the end of it. Do you think there's ever a way back for an ex-player once they've kind of crossed that line, James?
Well, everybody's got an opinion. It's a matter, and there's always going to be someone who agrees with it, and there's always going to be someone who disagrees with it. There's chances are there's probably someone who thinks Chris Commons is sort of has some of the greatest football opinions going. There's definitely someone who thinks that, and there's definitely people like us on the show who think a lot of the stuff that he says nowadays isn't exactly what we would be wanting to hear. You could say the same about guys like Andy Walker. He's a very sort of divisive figure amongst all Scottish football fans. But it's when you go into a punditry role, they've got to be looking at it from a neutral point of view. You would think of it if everything they were saying was sort of Celtic centred, or if it was all Celtic positive, then there'd be a lot of question marks about Chris Commons' sort of credibility as a pundit compared to the question marks that already surround it nowadays. So I think you'll probably see, even as some players are going to the media nowadays, you'd imagine you'd maybe see someone like a Cal McGregor on the telly, or maybe even a Scott Brown one day. Well, I hope not. I hope his managerial career goes very well. But it would be interesting to see what those guys are like if they go into a sort of media career in the future. I can definitely imagine Cal McGregor being sat on sort of the sports scene bench or something.
Well, you know this, right? I found it quite unusual to see Scott Brown entering that world. Obviously, he's retreated back and he's now the manager of Fleetwood, and we wish him well. But it brings to mind, Kev McCluskey, a bit of footage that I shared on the socials just over the last few days of the 1977 Scottish Cup final, where the ball was basically saved on the line. We got a penalty. Andy Lynch scores the goal. I'd posted it due to the fact that Roy Aitken was playing there as a very young 20-year-old, I think he was at the time, under Jockstein. He played in that season. He played in that particular game. And we, of course, will be joined by Roy Aitken at the end of this month, a week on Friday, actually. Some tickets still available, link underneath the video. And Paddy Crerand was doing the co-commentary. Ex-Celt, obviously, Paddy Crerand doing the commentary. If you listen to it back, 2 hands on the ball. He said it was undeniably a penalty, and I don't think he was ever asked back to commentate on Scottish football again, Kevin, because that is basically what happens. We'll not talk about some of Kenny Miller's, another ex-Celt, believe it or not, comments over the last few days in relation to Celtic's treble-winning exploits and how we were just a whisker ahead of Rangers and all that nonsense. Let's just talk about the Japanese tour for a minute, Kevin. I think the first game against Portman showed us just how much we have missed the football, because when we didn't get the usual updates and the footage and streams, etc., or even coverage on Celtic TV, it was like we were getting withdrawal symptoms. We've got a game tomorrow. It'll kick off at 11 o'clock, Celtic Park time. And we've then got Gamba Osaka. We're really chuffed for Liam. But how chuffed are you that the football's back and we can start covering it again on Acsom?
Delighted. I was listening to the Bulletin yesterday, and Jerry on the show kind of echo his sentiments. Like, you miss it on the weekends when there's nothing else to do. In a way, it kind of becomes part of your ritual and your routine. Certainly for the past season, me and you have been coming on doing most of the match day shows. So that's like 4 or 5 hours out of your day now that you've got to try and fill, and there's no an excuse now. You've got to go shopping with the wife or take the wee one out to the park or something like that. You've got to become a social human being again. So I'm quite looking forward to the football coming back and becoming a bit more of a recluse and getting back into it and watching the team. It's and this is the exciting part of the season, because you see the new players coming in, and there's now a new manager, so there's new ideas and everything's a bit fresh again. So it gives you that wee bit of spark, and yeah, it'll be good to get to see these next 2 games, because, as you say, finally they're back in Celtic TV, and for Liam, you'll actually get to go and see them in the flesh. So, aye,
absolutely
pretty jealous of you for that.
Yeah, really buzzing for Liam. And I'm going to come back to Liam, because what I want to know is obviously tomorrow's game. We'll cover it. We'll do our usual pre-match. It'll actually run into the bulletin. So we'll do the bulletin as normal whilst the game is into the second half. We'll do the pre-match. We'll do the half-time, all of that stuff. Tell us, what should we expect, Liam? Obviously, things have changed. This was meant to be a big kind of homecoming, another homecoming for Ange Postecoglou. But as these things happen in the world of football and the world of Celtic, it's fast moving. We've got Brendan Rodgers in charge, but we've got Yokohama F. Marinos tomorrow, followed by Gamba Osaka on Saturday. What should we expect from these 2 challenges?
Well, the irony is that with Yokohama, you're going to see a very much an Ange-style team. Because since Kevin Muscat replaced him as manager, he has pretty much continued the same style of play, the same kind of impetus, high press, fast movement of the ball, great athleticism, great dynamism. It's going to be a tricky game for Celtic at this point in their pre-season, because Yokohama are right in the middle of the J-League season just now. The J-League season runs from March until November, so they are at their physical peak right now. And Celtic are just starting to find their groove again, and this is going to be a really good game, because it's going to be 2 teams that are going to be out to put on a show, and I think there could be a lot of goals tomorrow both ways. So it's an exciting prospect, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. As I say, we will kick off our content 30 minutes before kick-off, by which time we'll know what the lineup is going to be. Talking of lineups, we do expect that to change over the next couple of weeks in relation to incomings and outgoings. And I want to spend a wee bit of time on that, because the tagline there says, Celtic were recently stung with £10 million buys. Why caution is the way ahead? And I'm looking towards everything that comes out of Brendan Rodgers' conferences, press conferences, etc., James, as you do. You look at every nuance, everything it says. There's been quite a bit of chat, and I want to kind of pinpoint some of that. He's talking about showing a bit of patience. issuing a bit of a spending warning. The money is there, but, chucking it at a transfer doesn't always solve the problem. And I think one of the examples I've been using recently is the Vialli versus Larsson example in 1997, where, Vialli would have got the kind of juices flowing, certainly big name, exciting. Larsson came in and became an absolute world-class player at Celtic. And I think that in recent times, the examples of Ajeti and Barkas, they have stung us big time. That's the £10 million I'm talking about. Barkas left the building almost quietly, contract tore up, we've lost all the money. It looks like Ajeti could be going the same way. I hope it is the end of his Celtic career this pre-season. Nothing against the guy. I just don't want us to keep him on the books and put him out on loan. James, so do you think this approach and the way that Brendan is kind of setting us up for a wee bit more caution is something that will work in the long run for Celtic?
Well, I mentioned last week how I didn't like that we'd sort of slowed down in the transfer window. I'd been echoing when I was hosting the show about the importance of going out and spending some money and building a European calibre squad, because Celtic aren't that right now. Celtic aren't a European calibre squad right now. It's roughly the same team we had last season, which was only good enough to finish fourth in the Champions League group. So if European ambition is the aim, then you've got to spend the money to do so. And Celtic haven't done that so far. I mentioned last week that it seems like we're sort of standing still, and it looks like we could have two signings coming through the door now, which fit the signing model that we had sort of previously been putting into practice under Ange Postecoglou. But I don't want us to leave the business too late. And if we leave the business too late and you spend the big money too late, the chances are it doesn't really work out. I'm certain one of the sort of biggest money failures I can think of in recent years is Harry Maguire. And Manchester United left themselves way too late, to the point where Harry Maguire was the only centre-back option they had, and they had spent £80 million to get the only option that was available. So you've got to be able to find the balance. It's all about balance. And with the market Celtic are shopping, and it's a lot harder to find players. It's easier for, like I mentioned, Manchester United to find a centre-back than it would be for Celtic to find a centre-back that would slot right into the team. So when you look across the squad, and if you're being brutally honest, as I've mentioned time and time again, there is positions where you have to improve with European ambitions in mind. And Celtic, they don't want to leave themselves too late in the window. I'm all happy with us being cautious, but as long as the caution doesn't lead to complacency and we leave it too late in the transfer window, we have to act if we're going to improve the positions that we want to, like a goalkeeper or a centre-back. But if you leave yourself too late, the options are going to be gone. As you've seen, Dominic Livakovic, as much as that might have seemed like a pipe dream anyway, it would have been worth Celtic chucking some money at that, and now it seems like he's off to Fenerbahce or wherever the teams are where he seems to be heading. But that's a play that really had me interested. That seems to be off the market now. So it's all about finding the balance between sort of caution and not getting complacent for Celtic.
I'm going to have a look at the signings that are already in the door, and I'm going to ask the question, do these fall under the, in inverted commas, project signings, right? I'm going to ask you your opinion on that. I'm also going to run through the list that I produced yesterday very quickly of the players that I think we should move on permanently if possible. And you can tell me if you think I'm being harsh on this or if that is really the reality of it, because I'll give you my kind of rationale behind it. But I do want to bring in some comments before we dish into some of that stuff. And Stephen Sloan, I really enjoyed a Wander Round Paradise video yesterday. I hope to see more of those videos in the future. Nice little 10-minute summaries on what's happening at Celtic every week or two. Thanks for that, Stephen. Yes, it all happened yesterday. So we went up to Celtic Park, early doors, got the wee chat, a wee Wander Round Paradise, of course, and it was edited and put on the channel for kind of early evening time. We'll tweak it. We'll keep tweaking it. It was maybe a wee bit rougher than we would have liked, but it was not quite a one take. A few people said I never mentioned Marco Tilio. I did, but it must have been in an earlier take when I fluffed my lines. Apologies for that. And we'll keep improving it. But you're absolutely right, Stephen. It was all about just getting like a bite size of everything that's happening. And we'll be doing it every Monday morning. And we'll hopefully have that video up on the channel on the Monday night, probably about 6 o'clock, 10-minute summary. So thanks very much for your feedback. I really I really appreciate it. And by the way, we'll get everybody who is able to involved in that as well. So if James McKenzie is available on a Monday morning, he might want to take a wee wander with me around Paradise, or even one of the listeners. You'll know where I'm going to be on a Monday morning. You can come up and join me. Alan Robertson, always great to hear from you. I hope you're well. Hopefully we'll see you soon as well. Now, Plunge, what I'm talking about here is 2 players at £5 million, but you are limited to the amount of characters you can put on the title. So it's £10 million that we've kind of ruined and wasted, not a £10 million singular buy. So it was Ayeti and Barkas I was referring to on that. And Paddy, that's another great idea. You should take a wander round the Doyne. Yes, listen, I'm quite happy to go anywhere. Bring the camera. And we can take a wander around anywhere and talk about Celtic. That's what people say to me when we started the live stream. Can't believe you can fill an hour talking about Celtic. And my response to that always is, if I wasn't broadcasting it, I would be talking about Celtic for an hour every day anyway, because I never find it difficult to chat about Celtic. David Boyle, the transfer business seems to be functioning great. Would love some recruitment at centre-back. And I'm going to be talking about that, but I'm going to come to you first, Kevin McCluskey. We've actually brought in 3 players confirmed. So, we've got to mention Iwata, whose transfer was made permanent. He was under 850 grand, I believe. We've got also Marco Tellio. There you go. I've mentioned him. He's came in for around £2 million, 21 years of age, from Melbourne City, and Odin Thiago Holm, a player that James has spoken a lot about when he was doing the 2 weeks of hosting. 20-year-old, £2.5 million there or thereabouts. That's what we've brought in so far. We do expect Yang and Kwon to come in, also South Korean players to come in for £2 to £2.3 million each. Are these project signings? Does that concern you at all? Because, going by the last comment, the recruitment, system and strategy seems to be working, Kevin.
I'm a little bit in 2 minds as to how to classify these signings. Iwata, we can deal with separately because we know him. He's a known quantity. He's coming in as a proven player. He's got some experience in Scotland now, and we know he's just going to kick on this season and become, I would think, a really important player in the midfield for us. The other 2, and then if you want to include the 2 South Korean boys as well, they look like they're coming in. Because the values are low and they're all below £2.5 million, and because we don't really know them that well because they're coming from kind of unfashionable leagues, they're going to get this project signing tag on them. But that could just be our ignorance about these players that we're putting that tag on them, because you could easily put the same on Daisen Maeda or Rio Hatate because we didn't know who they were before they came in. Jota was a bit of a project as well because of his background. He'd been kind of padded around a few clubs before he came to us. And then look at the player he turned into. Look at the player he was, and we made him. So I think we've been stung quite a bit in the past with all the project stuff. When you look back, it's whoops, that's me just knocked a bottle over. I'm
not going to ask a bottle of what. I'm not going to ask the contents of said bottle.
An empty bottle of water, Paul, in this house.
At 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it has to be. Yes. So as I was saying, we've been stung in the past with these project signings when you look back at guys like Bayo and Bangura and the likes, and I think they always stick in the back of the mind. But we're in a different era now. We've got a new recruitment team behind the scenes who've worked wonders for the last 2.5 years or however long they've been there. So I think we've got to have a bit of confidence about them and belief that actually we're going out. They're low value players. There's a low risk behind them because of that, but have trust that they're actually going to become good players for us and first team players and starters. At the same time, there's always that wee bit gnawing at the back of the mind where I'm coming on board a little bit with what James is saying, that you want to sign a player that you know as well. You want to have that confidence behind a player that's coming in, that you just be like, this guy's done it in France, or he's done it in Germany, he's done it down south. It doesn't have to be a £10 million player, just somebody that's a known name, a known quantity that comes in and fills you with a bit more confidence. So I think it's really difficult from a Celtic perspective to get your signings right, because we think we can just throw money out there, but it's not that easy.
No.
£10 million players don't necessarily want to come and play in Scotland. You then get the tax of it being Celtic, I think, adds that wee bit extra on. So I think it's really tough for us to get the signings right. We have done over the last couple of seasons. So let's have faith that Killio, Odin Holm, is it Hyun, and I can't remember the other Korean's name. I'd probably mispronounce it anyway.
Well, we refer to O as O, and we used to refer to Key as Key, didn't we? So
we did.
Using that as a rule.
He was Dave, actually. It was Dave, was he not?
Was he Dave?
So we'll call him Stephen James. There you go.
There we go. No problem.
Aye, they all come in and they all just hit the ground running, and they're as good as the previous signings we've made in the last 18 months.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to ask Liam, am I right to refer to our imminent arrivals as Yang and Kwon if I'm using O and Ki as the rule?
Yes. Korean names are typically 3 parts, and the family name is the first part. So, yeah, in this case, it's O, Kwon, and Yang are the family names, respectively, and that's the names you'd see in the shirts. Mm-hmm. Where Celtic confuse it a wee bit is that the Japanese players have their first names on their shirts now, for some reason.
Yeah.
Now, in Japan, you do write the family name first and the given name second. So, like, in Japanese newspapers, it's Maeda Daizen and Furuhashi Kyogo.
Right.
So, if you apply Japanese logic to it, the second name is Kyogo and Daizen, so that's what goes on the back of the shirt. But it's as someone who lives in Japan, I just find it a bit weird that he wears Kyogo for Celtic, but Furuhashi for Japan. It's a bit confusing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm going to probably reword this a wee bit rather than using project, because I think project, as Kevin mentioned earlier, brings back memories of Bangura and Shved and a whole plethora of players, and it didn't work out. I don't want to be unfair on these 4 guys that we're talking about, but what I will say then is that we're buying bags of potential with these 4 guys, and we're probably buying players. I say probably very loosely. We're buying players that were in the mix and were on the cards before Brendan Rodgers came in the building. Now, there's nothing we can do about that because we had our plans in place, obviously, for this summer and moving into next season because we had a different manager in place. So it's understandable. Now, if Brendan Rodgers was to come in and say, I don't like having looked at the data, maybe looked at some video analysis, I don't like the look of that player, I don't want him in my squad, then I'm pretty sure they would have completely changed tact on it. But he's spoken quite openly about the fact that he was presented with players previously, Liam, and he said some of them were in that kind of category of quality and some were way over there. So what he was trying to say, they just weren't good enough. And I mean, he spoke about it at the time, he's fed, in and around the Terminado interviews and all this kind of stuff. We know he wasn't his player. And, you just got to look at how often Compere actually played for Celtic to know that he would have come into that category as well. And I think that's where the concern comes in. But we've got to show a bit of faith, as Kevin says, don't we? Because we have been doing it right in the last couple of seasons.
What I would say to this, and this might be a bit of a controversial view, but to me, the phrase project signing is entirely subjective, right? Anybody who doesn't know the J-League would have said Daisen Maeda was a project signing. I would have said, no, you're signing the best player in Japan last year, right? So, Jared is similarly passionate about Marco Tellio. He'll say, look, he's a full Australia international. He was in the World Cup squad. How big do you have to be before you're not considered a project anymore? He's already played at the very highest level internationally before he's even come to Celtic. So he is on paper definitely not a project. But if he's not walking straight into the first team, the perception is going to be that he's a project.
Yeah.
Same with these 2 Korean players. Is from what little I know of them, they're both basically the star men of their respective teams and established names in the Korean K-League. So, again, project or not, it depends on your knowledge or your perception of Korean football. And I'm going to say it, Korea have been to the last 6 World Cups and Scotland haven't been to any of them. So I don't really think we're in a position to look down on South Korea or Japan.
It's a great point, and you've made it well previously when talking about the Japanese national side as well, Liam. And yeah, there is a snobbery. There's absolutely a snobbery, and that's what existed when Ange Postecoglou was announced as Celtic manager. You know, it's very Eurocentric, this attitude that we don't know your league, therefore it can't be any good, and we don't really want to be signing your players. However, if they turn out, as some of the other players have done from leagues that are maybe unfancied, then I'll be all for it. But I also understand this clamour for the kind of known quantities that Kevin McCluskey was talking about earlier, James. I'm going to come to you just now because I had a very interesting experience last night where Kevin Graham had sent me a blog for the Acsom website, and I finally got round to editing it last night, but then I realised that he sent me it in 2019. So for anybody out there who's maybe sent an email and hasn't had a response yet, I'm sorry, right? Because there's a wee bit of backlog on most of these things. But it was a very enjoyable blog, I've got to say, and we were able to make it relevant insofar as it was looking at Brendan Rodgers' then European campaign for Celtic. And it was quite interesting to look back on that in the here and now, because we're now looking towards his next European campaign, as it would be. So yesterday I was just looking, James, I know you keep an eye on all things football at all different levels, from Bonnyrigg Rose to Bayern Munich, and I was looking at the Champions League teams that Celtic are nestling in beside at the moment. I'll run through them for anybody who hasn't seen them. This isn't the final list, but this is the 26 confirmed sides already in the groups. So here we go: Arsenal, Man City, Newcastle, Man United, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Sevilla, Real Sociedad, Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund, RB Leipzig, Union Berlin, Josip Juranovic, Inter Milan, Lazio, or Nazio, as Andrew Innes called them when we had them up for the game, AC Milan, Napoli, Benfica, Red Star Belgrade, Feyenoord, Shakhtar Donetsk, RB Salzburg, PSG, Lens, Celtic, and Porto. So that's the teams that we currently are rubbing shoulders with in that group. We're waiting for some more arrivals. Now, this takes me on to Kev Graham's blog, because what he was talking about, he was bemoaning the Champions League knockout at that season. You'll remember it was AEK Athens, or AEK Athens, who just happened to have back-ass and goals for them, by the way, over the two legs. And eventually we signed him, and he was one of the £5 million guys we're talking about here. Right. So this was the 2018-19 Champions League / Europa League campaign. And AEK Athens knocked us out, and then Valencia knocked us out. After a reasonable result at home, they beat us away from home. And what Kevin Graham was saying is, right, what is a European aspiration for Celtic, and what does it cost? That's basically what the argument was. That's what the blog was. And it's as relevant today, 4 years on, as it was then, James, right? So his point at the time was, we sold, in that period, we sold, bear in mind, we're playing a qualifier against the AEK Athens, and we sold Stuart Armstrong, £7 million we got for him, right? We were to sell Moussa Dembele. He wasn't 100% fit for these games, but we were to sell him in the same month. So that was £27 million recouped for two players. At that time, I'm not saying we should go for him now, Paddy Roberts was a Celtic loanee who had spent about a season and a half at Celtic. Had we were to go ahead and sign him permanently as part of our kind of rebuild or our pre-season programme, it would have cost us in the region of £7.5 million at that point. Funny how we've had quite a few free transfers since then. Benkovic was to come in later in the month. It was one of the ones where it was too late to the party for Benkovic. He didn't play in against Athens. Neither did Boyata for other reasons. And both games featured Jack Hendry at centre-half alongside a young Chris Ayer. Had we signed Benkovic, it would have cost us £10 million. I'm going by the kind of average valuations at that point of the players. And believe it or not, Toljan came in that season. He was to play the later game against Valencia. I wasn't a big fan. But if we had all our ducks in a row, he would have cost us £5 million, James. So if we kept the two and we signed those three, that investment would have been £49.5 million, right? £50 million going into that Athens game. By the way, I think we should have beat Athens anyway, looking back on those two games. Would that £50 million, this is the question, would that £50 million investment have made us perform any better if we had got through against Athens, right? So how did they do in the group? You might remember they were grouped alongside Bayern Munich, Ajax and Benfica. They won 0 games. They won 0 points. They lost all 6 games. Now, Ajax, who qualified through that group, they went on to beat Real Madrid, Juventus, and were finally knocked out by Liverpool in the semi-finals. Liverpool went on to win the tournament, beating Spurs, Angie's Spurs. Bayern Munich also getting through that group. They got knocked out by Liverpool in the first knockout stage. So the point remains, right? What is European ambition? Is European ambition, James, shelling out that 50 million? And if we did, how much further would we have got that year?
It's a really interesting point you make. You look at guys, if you spend 10 million on Benkovic, look where he is now. If you spent £7.5 million on Patrick Roberts, if you spent £7.5 million on Patrick Roberts, look where he is now. But when you forget, one move can completely change a career. If Patrick Roberts doesn't go back to Man City and gets shelled on all these loan spells, if he goes to Celtic for £7.5 million and plays regularly, his career could be a way up here. One move can completely make a career. Hindsight is a fantastic thing. I'm sure if we signed Filip Benkovic, he would perhaps be a top team right now instead of going on a loan spell to wherever it was he went, instead of coming back to Celtic and ended up wherever he is now. We all know how important transfers are in a footballer's career. It can change a career just like that. So I feel like if Celtic had made some of those signings, who knows where we would have been in the Champions League in the next few years. But when you look at Celtic, you can be ambitious, but you can be a selling club at the same time. You don't have to be one or the other. Celtic can be ambitious in different ways, though, whether that be changing our signing philosophy. As I mentioned on last week's show, we can start, instead of signing £1 million players, selling for 10 million, we can go up to 5 million selling for 20 million, which seems to be what we're doing right now with Jota and Cam and Carter Vickers. We're at that level. And you're seeing from signing players for about £6.5 million, like a Jota and a Cam and Carter Vickers, those guys are levels ahead than some of the other players in our squad. You know you've signed proven quality in Cam and Carter Vickers who can come into this team and can show us up. You could be confident with Cam and Carter Vickers in a European game. It's not Cam and Carter Vickers you're worried about, it's the guy next to him you're worried about. So if Celtic can keep spending similar amounts of money with this sort of knowledge we have now with our scouts and sort of our talent identifications come on leaps and bounds in the last 2 and 3 years, and you can thank Ange Postecoglou for that. But if we can keep attributing this sort of scouting system we have now up to sort of higher echelon markets, then there's no reason why Celtic can't be more ambitious to try and push on in Europe. And to be more ambitious, I feel like it goes hand in hand with spending money. I've said it the last sort of few weeks now, if you're going to be ambitious in football these days, you have to spend money, which means you have to take risks, which the Celtic board, we know, don't really like to do. They don't really like to take risks, but it's what you have to do to sort of make it in today's football. You see, I always point to Ajax. The Ajax are the team that Celtic fans have always pointed at as the model to follow for probably the last 10 years. That's because their model works. They're selling players for 80, 90 million now. They weren't doing that 10 years ago. They were selling players for about 20 million 10 years ago. But they gradually built themselves up. Fair enough, they have a far better youth academy than us, but they've bought in players as well. Anthony didn't come through the youth academy. They bought Anthony for about 20 million and sold him for 90 million about 2 seasons later. It's all about gradually building yourself up. And I feel like Celtic sort of have to do that. They have to be ambitious.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's great that you've managed to take that example, James, and bring it into the conversation we're having today in relation to, throwing the money out there and actually using a more kind of patient and gradual process. Kevin McCluskey, I mean, at that time, Benkovic, he looked brilliant. He looked like a world beater, when he came in on loan. And, there would have been this clamour, sign him, and he would have been a massive signing, and we would have all been buzzing. But, we never know what would have gone on there. And it's a rhetorical question. Of course it is. But I think the point is you can throw all this money and maybe progress that one stage further, or indeed you won't progress at all. And then, how long can you keep throwing money at it with no progression until it gets to the point where we can't keep financing that style of model? Do you agree with James, Kevin? It's an incremental change. It's season on season, improving all the time.
I think it has to be for a club like Celtic. I think it's the only sensible way forward. I think if we were to go and spend 50 million on players this summer as our net spend, I genuinely don't see us progressing much further than if we spent 10 million as our net spend. because I don't think we're a Champions League level team at the moment. So to throw 50 million at it, you're not going to see the results, the return that you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be kind of gradually done. We've got to be patient with this. And I think as a fan base, we've been really, really patient with the club being ill run for the last 20 years, probably, when you see the lack of progress we've made in Europe. We need to be a bit more patient again, but the patience can only last as long as we've got a plan in place, which is, like James says, kind of gradual progression. So we're signing players just now for like this kind of £5 million range. Let's get it up to 7.5 million if we can. Let's get a £10 million signing in maybe 3 or 4 years' time, because hopefully by that point we've actually taken ourselves on and we're going to say like an established team in the Champions League. We might not be getting out the Champions League groups, but we can be an established third place team, or we can be a side that can get far in the Europa League. And that's probably got to be the level that we've got to look at in terms of the progress. So for me, it has to be a staged build-up. It has to be gradual, but we need to have buy-in kind of across the board, from fans actually to the board level, to make this work.
Yeah,
I feel like
Liam. Sorry, James.
It's going to jump in here. I think when people see Celtic buy a player for £7 million, as Kevin said, or even £10 million, they crap themselves because, we've spent £10 million. We don't usually do that. But they forget about the upside goes up as well. But when you spend that money, the upside goes up with it as well. It's Celtic can benefit in all ways from spending that money on a player. But as Kevin mentioned, it's all about patience. You've got to just build it up gradually. But when you see Celtic spend about £7 million on a player, you've got to have a bit of confidence in the player. Celtic have had the confidence to spend £7 million on the player themselves. So I think the fans should probably share the same confidence instead of the nerves or the fear that comes with that.
Listen, you've mentioned 7 million. Sorry, Kevin.
Sorry, I would say on that one as well. So if we're spending 7 million on a player, we've got to believe he's a good player. But he's also coming into Scotland. So that limits his resale value as well. Which is why I've got the worry just now of over, is it Reader, the guy from Young Boys that we've been linked with, and he was at a 12, 13 million pound signing. If you're applying the logic that you want on this one, we've got to sell him at 25 million. We don't really sell players at 25 million that regularly. I know we've just done Jota, but I think that's partly because he went to the Saudi League and they're just throwing money. If he went down south, it's probably 18, 20 million is what we would have been getting. So I think this is why it has to be really like gradual step up. But we can get there in time. But right now, we need the likes of Tillio and Odenholm and these boys to kick on and take us to a level in Europe that we're not at the moment, that makes us more attractive to a 7 or 10 million pound player to want to come to Celtic and see that progression, that we can actually take his career on far while he's still here, and he doesn't necessarily have to move to get the progression, if that kind of makes sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, the £7 million player, I'm thinking of Chris Julian, and I know that his career tapered off through injury and everything else, but I think on the whole, when you look at him, the job that he did at the time, you certainly wouldn't say he was a flop. We didn't get our money back. So in terms of the recruitment strategy, maybe it didn't work. Odsonne Edouard worked. He was a massive signing. Jota worked. Massive signing, £6.5 million.
The club kept Edouard past his sell-on date. That was the only reason we didn't get more for Odsonne Edouard. I'm confident that if they sold Odsonne Edouard a season earlier, before the 10-in-a-row season, they would probably got 30 million for Odsonne Edouard.
Who was interested? Arsenal. Arsenal kept coming up, didn't they?
Leicester were interested. Yeah. There's a 25 million bid from Leicester. At least that's what the reports were. But if you have two Premier League clubs battling it out for them, or one of them at Arsenal that went on to fight for the Premier League title 2 seasons later, I've no doubt Celtic could have pushed the boat out for teams like that.
Mm-hmm. But again, I think as long as we're there in the Champions League, Liam, and obviously that's changing in itself, talking about Europa League, that's going to be something that we can't focus on, because in terms of dropping into different tournaments, that's all going to change. So the Champions League is where it's at, and if Celtic are at that table year in, year out, that's where players want to play. even though you've got that caveat of the fact that, yes, it is a Scottish league, it's not the sexiest league in Europe, but we can give you this platform. And then we can start using the examples that we've already used. We would turn a player like Jota from a bench Fika player, as Alistair Johnson called him, bench Fika. It was a bit cheeky of him. A Benfica reserve player into a player who makes a £25 million move into a league that's getting a huge amount of attention at the moment, Liam. So I think that at this moment in time, I'm not too concerned about the three guys that we've signed and the other two that are in the wings coming in, or the prices or where they've come from. Because I do think that Brendan Rodgers is a strong enough character. He was a strong enough character the last time to walk out on Celtic when things weren't going maybe as planned or as promised. And when he's come in, he's been asked the question, he's been really brutally honest about it. You know, the system wasn't right back then, but it's right now. So it could well be that we do have 2 or 3 known quantities, as Kev mentioned earlier. It's just a case of having the patience to get the deals done.
Yeah, I think that at the moment we are witnessing basically a football arms race between England and Saudi, mostly driven by money and ego. And basically with the sale of Jota, who, fantastic player, but personally I don't think he's Celtic's best player. I think Kyogo and Hatate are both better players for me. But anyway, that's a side issue. My point is, we are selling one of our first team players, but not necessarily our best player, for 25 million, thanks to the arms race that has been triggered by the emergence of the Saudi League. So that, to me, the upper limit, which right now is about 25 million, is the most we've ever been able to command for any player. That's out the window now. The Saudi signing shows if they want a player, they'll pay whatever they have to pay to get him.
Yeah.
And England is going to have to try and keep up with that. And quite frankly, they have such an obscene amount of money down there that they can afford to do that if they choose to. So really, I don't think there's much difference between signing a player for 3, 4, 5, 6 million or 15 million. Because if they're a good player, the sky's the limit on the money you can get for them, regardless. You know, Jota was a 6 million player, is now gone for 25, right? Edward was a £9 million player. Went for, I believe, less than 25 when we sold him. Mm-hmm. So now James made the point that we held on to Edward a season longer than we should have. We would have got more. But the point still stands that, you know, just because it's a £9-10 million signing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to command that higher tier fee when you sell them. The emphasis with Celtic has always been about risk management, and that's clear with the board. But I think they have finally, at least in the footballing context, if not the marketing context, they've finally moved to the point where they understand that we have to speculate to accumulate. So basically, we are spending money now, but I like the fact that we're spending it wisely. Mm-hmm. We're not spending 10-12 million on one player, right? You know, what would you rather have? 3.5 Kyogos or 1 Torre Flo? You know, I mean, I can keep bringing that up, right? But that is the key. You know, would you rather have, you know?
How many Kyogos for a Maguire? How many Kyogos was it?
I don't know, but I know it's 16 Rio Hatates. So
I know what I'd rather have: 16 Rio Hatates
or 1 Saka Tatis and Harry Maguire. It's up to you, you know.
Absolutely. Keen to get your thoughts on all things Celtic. Thanks everybody for getting involved in the comments. We have Lord Flashheart, not sure about the third top. Looks too much like a training top to me. Yes, we will be discussing that. There's a few football jersey aficionados on the show today. And we've also got NPM SEO, a quality free transfer like Tete on good wages. Would be better use of funds than splurging on a 10 million or so player who would also have wage costs on top. By the way, Tete, I don't think's out the picture. There's been some images of him circulating around social media, which is getting everybody into a bit of a lather. That's what happens at this time of the year. It'll all settle down.
Leon, we'd be competing with Leon for him. They've apparently got a bit of interest in him.
Right. Well, this is the thing, James, because I know that he's obviously worked with Brendan Rodgers, but that only takes you so far once, the big carrot in football being the dough is dangled in front of the player. Danny boy, welcome to the show, Danny. Please, Brendan, no marquee signings, says Danny. It's only window dressing, only players who fit the system, please. But I think he knows this already. He seems very calm when he's asked the question. Ridiculizer, thanks for your comments. Nice video yesterday. We'd like to see one of a wee tour inside the place. Yeah, that would be great. I was asked the question yesterday in relation to why we don't do more stuff, in and around the stadium on match day. There's a couple of reasons for it. The first one is it's all around broadcasting rights, and we're not allowed to broadcast in the stadium. In fact, you're not meant to film the pitch with your mobile phone and put it on social media. For example, because the rights holders would not be happy with that. So we can't do anything in the stadium, and there's even a footprint outside the stadium that we can't do anything. So we do tend to do it from the studio. Hopefully during the season we'll have far more people doing the match day than myself, which will allow me to actually go and sit in my seat and watch the game more often than I have done over the last couple of seasons. But thanks for your comments. It's quite nice being a wee bit outside the ground, though, you know what I mean, rather than being inside. It's always sometimes nice to be on the outside looking in. So we're definitely going to be doing it every Monday. IH decorating. This side needs quality in key positions to make any kind of mark in Europe. A few unproven youngsters won't take us up a level. No, I totally get it, but Matt O'Reilly and Rio Atati were unproven youngsters, I guess. That January they came in, and we've seen how they've developed. I mean, if they were to go now and, I hope they don't, and I'm touching wood, I hope they don't, we would command huge fees. They have progressed and developed incredibly in the period that they've been here, and we're kind of hoping for that. Right, somebody else brought it up. We're going to discuss it. It's a new third kit. I'm going to ask Liam first and foremost. I've now got a theory, Liam. I studied football jerseys. By the way, right, I've not been pushing this or anything, but from time to time I mention the fact I did the Celtic jersey book. It's out there. You can pick it up in the Celtic shop and all that. I got my first 1-star review on Amazon yesterday. Cheers, Cameron, whoever you are, mate. And he definitely bought the book, right? Because it's a verified purchase on Amazon. I've got nothing to do with all that side of stuff, by the way. That's the publishers. And he's given me a 1-star. Too many pictures. No enough words. It's a coffee table book, mate. And by the way, there's about 100,000 words in there, and it took me 7 years to write them. But thanks for your feedback. Good, bad, or indifferent. I've got to take it all on the chin. When I first seen it, I thought, all right, this must be a troll. I went in, verified purchase. That was a right dig in the ribs. He has actually got the book. He's actually got the book. 1-star. Cheers, mate. Right, we're going to be talking about Celtic jerseys, Liam. I know you love a football jersey. You appear every single week on here with your huge collection doing the rounds. Some of them are absolutely cracking, obscure, all these things. I've now got a theory, right, because I've been digging my heels in on this home jersey. And I went up again and I looked at it at the Celtic Superstore to say, right, am I going to have my mind changed on this? And the answer is no. I don't like it. I don't like the hoops getting messed with. It's simple as that. They're too wavy. They need to be simple. They need to be straight and all that, right? But I'm looking at all these other jerseys that are kicking about now from all different manufacturers, and they're not tending to go for that traditional style, which I think the jersey you're wearing right now is a bit of an anomaly in that respect. That's a very traditional jersey, straight lines and all that. 3 colours and everything, Liam. That's the kind of shirts I like. And by the way, that was the biggest selling away jersey in recent times, so maybe they should have used that template. But they seem to be going for wackier designs, I would say, Liam. Maybe aimed at markets globally rather than the hotbed of Glasgow and the surrounding areas. They seem to be targeting them maybe at a younger market, maybe even a kids market. And I then look at the training gear and I see loads of cool as anything training tops produced by Adidas for Celtic that I think look better as traditional football jerseys. So what they're maybe saying is, right, we can get away with releasing 20 different items a season. The jerseys are what the kids will go for, and all the training gears what all these dads and granddads like me will go for, Liam. That I've come round to that realisation. Am I right?
Maybe. But, I do slight tangent here. I've got a wee story about the new home jersey.
Oh, there we go.
I finally caved in. Last Friday, it got released in Japan on Adidas Japan. And I thought, right, all right, okay, I'm going to the game next week. If I order it from Adidas, I'll get it tomorrow. I can wear it to the game. Ordered it. Size 2XL, which is the size I've got on just now, which is actually getting a bit loose on me because I've lost a bit of weight recently, right? But I thought I'll go with last season's size just to be safe, right? It arrived very, very loose around the belly, but extremely, like, painfully tight on the shoulders and neck, to the point that I could barely get the thing on. The proportions of this new shirt are all over the place. Now, I don't know if this is just a Japan thing or if it's a worldwide thing. That is not a 2XL shirt. It's like an L if you're lucky, right? It's tiny compared to last season's shirts. Now, that might just be Japanese sizing. I don't know. But it's not good when you go on the Adidas website, you see 2XL with no disclaimer saying Asian size or whatever, right? So it arrived on Saturday. I sent it back on Sunday and got a refund. I'll just be wearing last season's hoops tomorrow. And let's just say now, I'm going to get ripped a new one in the comments for this, but it needs to be said. I went on to a certain Chinese website, ordered the new home kit, the new away kit, the new third kit, and another home kit for the wife, all for less than I would have paid for the one home shirt from Adidas. Those shirts will arrive within the next couple of weeks. They will be identical to the official ones, and I know how they do their sizes, so I know it's going to fit me.
But listen, the prices are absolutely shocking. I mean, let's be honest. If you were to see the cost price, and I know, yeah, there's got to be a margin and all that, but they're pushing it. They really are pushing it with these jerseys. I'm going to get to James and Kevin to ask you a wee bit more about the third jersey that's came out. But I'm getting loads of stick in the comments, which is tremendous, about the Celtic jersey book, which I love, because apparently I've not mentioned that enough on here. Have I mentioned that a lot? Have I, Paul? Probably. Right, 25 quid down the drain, Paddy says. Yeah, I know. Poor Cameron. I might start a fundraiser for him, just to, or get him to send me it back, just to retract that 1-star review on Amazon. That was a bit cheeky, was it not? But I tell you, Mark Taylor, who has got a copy, and I've seen pictures of it online, last season he started taking that book around the grounds down south, and getting ex-Celts to sign the pages that appear on it. It looks absolutely brilliant. It's going to be a real collector's item once you've finished that, and well done to you. Joseph McGonigal, afternoon to yourself. There's a few known faces, Johnny Ryan as well, and also Martin Kay. Great to see some of the regulars and some new names coming through as well. And sorry, Patrick, it all comes down to a lack of characters in the title on YouTube. I know we've not signed anybody for £10 million, but the £10 million I'm talking about is the two £5 million guys that we signed in Ayeti and Barkas, who were, let's be honest, a complete waste of money. Too many words for me, not enough picks. I know, Pablo, I know how you feel. There are not enough words in my title, and that's what's confusing people. And Michael Ross O'Reilly did nothing in Europe. I'm not so sure about that.
Got man of the match, Ian Schechter.
I thought he was brilliant, when he moved back. Was it he played against Real Madrid in that defensive midfield spot as well, did he not? In one of the games, I thought he had a decent tournament for his first crack at the Champions League, and I'm looking forward to seeing guys like him and Hatate and even Kyogo next season. Now that they know what it's all about, they know the level that they're playing at, because they had 6 games last season and they can take it on the next season. I'm also looking forward to Carter Vickers, who lost a couple of games last season due to his injury as well. I'm looking forward to that. But we'll stay on the jersey at the moment. Kevin McCluskey, I'll come to you first, right? Big Bems, the big fella, right? Friend of the podcast. He's actually modelled an Acsom trackie before he's modelled a Celtic strip. I didn't want to post that on the socials because people would have thought my nose was out of joint. I'm so chuffed for Bems. One of the nicest guys I've ever met. Big Celtic fan. He's obviously a Scottish rapper. The rap scene in Scotland and Ireland is really on the up and up. And Celtic have embraced him. And I think, did they embrace him after the Jota song went viral, Kevin? Maybe. I think that's where they've embraced him. And he's doing the Celtic View podcast this week. He's part of the modelling and launch of the new kit. It's his music that's actually playing in the background. And by the way, I'm not just here to moan. I like the third kit. I actually quite like it. Kevin, what's your take on it?
No, I like it as well. I can't remember who it was, the comment that came up earlier on when you'd mentioned it was like a third kit. Not like a third kit, as a third kit. It was more like a training kit. And I get that. I agree with that. But I kind of feel that third kits can look like a training kit because it's the one that you're least likely to wear. So you can kind of have a wee bit of fun with designing it. I quite like it. I think it's quite funky. I hate the new hoops. I just can't get my head around why they've done what they've done with that. But this one's bringing me back on board to Adidas again. You know, it's a nice kit. I like it. Don't know if I'd spend, 60 or 70 quid to go and buy it right enough. So I might be a customer to a certain Chinese website as well. But that's nice. I like it.
I'm actually going to do this, right? Because this is how sad I am about football jerseys. Next time I take the wee guy up to the superstore, James, I'm going to ask him to choose of the three. Now, the last time I did that and I gave him the chance to choose himself, I didn't buy the one that I liked. He actually chose the goalie strip, which probably worked out quite well because he can wear it all year round with the long sleeves. However, I'm going to do that. And, you know, if he chooses the home kit, I'll admit it. I'll admit defeat. I'm just an old guy who's out of touch. But with regards to this, I do like the way that they've embraced BEMS. I like the way that Adidas sent out jerseys to Declan Welsh and the Decadent. Is it Decadent West? Yes. Now, by the way, we approached them to do a session with us before they've smashed it, so it's probably not going to happen now. But Adidas sent the jerseys out to their guys as well. They appeared at Transmit just the other week, gave a rousing kind of speech as well in relation to Palestine as well. If you've not seen it, get it stuck onto the YouTube. But the penny has finally dropped that we are a football team that appeals to the arts and appeals to bands and always have done, James. They finally embraced it.
Yeah, I remember I know Snoop Dogg will rock up in any football jersey. I've seen a photo of Snoop Dogg in a Burnley shirt. You could probably dig that up somewhere. But we've seen Snoop Dogg wearing Celtic shirts, all that. I think it's... we all know football jerseys are fashion. It's becoming more fashionable. I think I've mentioned a few times. PSG, I've done kits with Dior. Football shirts are becoming more and more fashionable again.
Yeah.
But the Celtic home shirt, I know I mentioned last week, I've started to sway to the thumbs up side for that Celtic home shirt. Well, I've gone back. I've seen it in the Portimonense game. Is that how you pronounce it? And I saw the black stripe down the side where it breaks off the hoops, and that's swayed me back to this might be one of the worst kits I've ever seen. So I'm on the bad side for that. But I really like the third kit though. As you mentioned, it does look a bit like a training kit. It reminds me of some of the training kits that Red Bull Leipzig have done in recent years. They've sort of been big splashes. They look phenomenal, I think, some of those Leipzig home kits. But yeah, it looks like a training kit, but the third kit is one to experiment with. And I think we've made a good experiment today rather than a pink and grey monstrosity.
Don't bemoan the pink and grey monstrosity, right? I've got one, thanks to our very own Lloyd Patrick Jepson. And one of these days, I'm going to wear it. It's not been on my back yet. Now, Celtic follower, inspired by the city's music scene. Yeah, you're right. I did wonder about that because I'm not sure where the inspiration is in the design. You know, if it was one of what do you call the wee centres you used to put in the vinyl, Liam? Remember the wee centres? The vinyl centre was missing. You're younger than me. I'm thinking you're the same age as me. And, you know, I thought at first it was one of them, the wee circular bit, right, in our records where it would be missing and you could put it in before you put it on a turntable. There must be a name for it. And I thought it was the part in one of them. But then I read the kind of blurb when it was released and I thought to myself, right, if you were going to do the music scene, surely you could have based it on the Barrowland sign because it's got the stars and you could have used the star prominently for obvious reasons. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. Other than the people they've used to model it, I'm not sure how that has got anything to do with the music scene whatsoever, Celtic followers. So yeah.
A friend of mine made a joke about the new third kit. He's not a Celtic fan. I'll let you guess what team he supports, but he says, oh, it looks like a fingerprint because that's what happens to most Celtic fans, getting their fingerprints taken, you know.
Oh, dearie me. Listen, it does look like a fingerprint. Now, what do you call that wee bit in the middle? Is this it? It's not an adapt, is it? Well, by the way, I will take Brendan's word for it because Brendan is a musician. And it's just, you know, you would get a record, a 7-inch vinyl, a 45 as you call it. The wee bit in the middle was missing, and then you would buy one of them, or you would get it with your turntable. I thought it was in the shape of that. It's quite a distinctive shape where we kind of like design. So there you go. The other week we were actually criticised for for daring to mention the name Kieran Tierney, James McKenzie, but Brendan Rodgers has now named him. And he's actually said, never say never. What did you make of that chat?
Obviously, Brendan's never going to say never. He'd love to have Kieran Tierney back at Celtic, as would we all. But I think it's a bit of a pipe dream. I've mentioned pipe dreams a few times on the show today and in the last few weeks. I think this is one of them. Unless it's some miraculous loan deal. I have a feeling if Tierney was going to come back, it would be too good to be true and he would just be chronically injured, as we've seen over the last few years. I remember, if I'm thinking about the signings I thought were too good to be true, I remember how excited I was and how buzzing I was when Charlie Musonda came to the club on an 18-month loan and he was chronically injured. So I have a feeling if Kieran Tierney was to come to Celtic, it would be too good for it all to work out, that there would be some catastrophic injuries or something in there. But never say never, as Brendan said.
Well, he did. He did say it. And by the way, Tom Mack saying Acid House music scene. What was the jersey? Was it Man City that kind of played homage to the Hacienda with the red and black? The black and yellow, something like that. You know, we should have looked at the Barrowlands if we were going to go full hog. We should have looked at the Barrowlands. Kevin McCluskey, we've already gone back. I can't ask you the question. Should we never go back? We've already gone back. We've already got nostalgic with Brendan Rodgers. But you know, the stumbling block, but Brendan doesn't seem to think it's definitely not going to happen, would be the finances around it. In terms of that, though, is that really where we should be, you know, putting our money, if you like? Kevin McCluskey, left back. I think I'll go back to what we said earlier, you know, players to make a difference who could stand up in Europe. I'm looking centre half. You know, we probably are weaker in the wings since Jota left. These are the positions I'm looking at rather than left back, maybe even goalkeeper. What's your take on it, Kev?
Where I'm looking for us to strengthen and bring someone in between now and the start of the season will be a goalkeeper for sure. I think we need someone to challenge Joe Hart. I think we need a centre back because we've only got Carter Vickers and he's out for the beginning of the season, and Starfelt. I don't have huge trust in the others at the moment to step up, although I'm hopeful that maybe domestically Welsh could, and Kobayashi, Liam, I'm hoping he lives up to all the expectation you've got of him there. I'm on the fence about him at the moment, so I'd look at those two areas. And then left back, I mean, for both the full-back positions, I think we could strengthen, but for me it would be a backup player to Johnston and Taylor. I don't think we need to go out and upgrade necessarily in either of those positions. Kieran Tierney would be phenomenal to have back because he's a great player, but James is pointing it out, although the obvious, his wages are going to be massive. He's injury prone. The return on that investment is not going to be worth it for Celtic, sadly. Maybe he'll be one of the players that we can welcome back to end his career at Celtic, and we'll bring him back because he's one of our own. But to bring him in now and on a loan deal, it would be far too much short-termism. I don't think we would get much of a benefit from it.
No. Listen, final point of the day, and I'm going to come to Liam because I know it's night time where you are, Liam, and you'll be buzzing to get to your bed and all that stuff. Now, Kobayashi's been mentioned by Kevin. Best case scenario right now is Kobayashi plays the 2 games over in Japan. He's in familiar surroundings. He's got his new gaffer. His gaffer shows a bit of belief in him because, let's be honest, he's not going to be feeling that confident after getting dropped for the Scottish Cup final last season. And he comes through that and the confidence starts to build from there. I said yesterday on the Wander Round Paradise, check it out if you haven't done so already on YouTube, that I think we were well organised in terms of getting a centre-half in because that centre-half was Kobayashi. It's not as though we're now thinking, we should have signed a centre-half. We've done that. It's just not worked out so far. Are you at the stage where you still think, Liam, because I know you hold him in high regard, you still think he's going to come through and he's going to show us what he can do and he's not going to be one of these guys that becomes a flop?
I still believe, but maybe not quite with the same strength that I did when we signed him. I know he has the ability. The ability is not in question. But after those couple of displays at the end of last season, his character, or should I say his nerve, is maybe a wee bit in question. He's a young player, new to the European scene. You know, Japan is a vastly different country to Scotland, as anyone who's come over here for the games will soon realise. it takes time to adjust. And I think give Kobayashi the first month or so of the season and see where he is then. Give him time to get used to the new manager's ideas. I think he's going to play at some point tomorrow regardless, because I think all the Japanese boys are going to get a run out tomorrow because, it's their homecoming. But also friendly match, they might change the entire team at half time, 8 or 9 subs or whatever, that sometimes happens too. So I think he's going to play regardless. But I really do hope he has a good game for whatever time he does play, because that's what he needs. Defenders are a bit like goalkeepers in that sense. All you need is 1 or 2 good games back to back, and that's you flying. But the other way, if you have 1 or 2 howlers, suddenly it gets your back up, and you're terrified to even put your foot on the ball.
Yeah.
I think it was a mistake tactically by Ange throwing Kobayashi into that game against Rangers last season, even though it was a meaningless game from a league-winning point of view. It's still a game at Ibrox against that mob, and you still want to beat them. And it still hurts when they beat us, even if it is meaningless. And I think a lot of the flack, if Kobayashi had a similar game against Livingston or Aberdeen, we wouldn't still be talking about it. But because it was against them, and because it then led to him not making the cup final, that's why we're having this conversation now. At the end of the day, he's had, 2 or 3 questionable games? That's it. Are you going to write a player off after 3 games?
Really? I hope not. I think he's one of these guys who was brought in last season by Ange, who could actually end up, as part of the squad, and O's going to be in there. He's going to play games. I'm not prepared to write him off. With your testimonial ringing in my ears when we signed him as well, Liam, I think, give him a chance, build up his confidence. Brendan Rodgers is good at that, and hopefully he can come through the other end of it. Plunge McNugget recommends the Rain Experiment. Get them checked out online. And we've heard a few different suggestions, but Jay Robertson also says it's called a spindle, by the way, that wee bit in the middle. And I could be wrong, it probably does look more like a fingerprint, but they're telling us it was musically inspired. So we've got to try and find where that link is. It's been an absolute pleasure today. Loads of you in the comments. Names I recognise, names I don't recognise. It's great to get the feedback on yesterday's video. Check it out. A wander round Paradise. I'm going to keep doing that. If you want to join me, just come up on a Monday and we'll get a wee chat and we'll take a wander around Paradise, and you can give me your views on that. We'll take 2 mics. Next week, I'll turn up and there'll be about 30 people there, and we'll not have enough mics for you. We'll just do a big, massive huddle, right? But thank you all for getting involved. We are going to be appearing with Roy the Bear Aiken a week on Friday. A few tickets still available, 15 quid. All the VIP ones are away. If you want to come along, the link is underneath the video. It'd be brilliant to see you at a fantastic venue just behind the Barras, actually, just behind the Barrowlands in Glasgow. That would be great to see you all there in person as well. I've got to say thank you to James McKenzie, Kevin McCluskey, and of course Liam Carrigan for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind. Liam, buzzing to hear your thoughts next week about your first experience in a long time, and of course your wife's experience of her first Celtic game. And we will be back tomorrow to cover that game. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and join us on a Celtic State of Mind at 12:30 tomorrow.